4:30 here at KAHI. Welcome back to the Monday edition of the KAHI Afternoon News. Casey Freelove with you here. Well, we all kind of get scared when we hear the word vulnerability, and I think a lot of us are kind of wrapped up in our own heads and lives and minds and are kind of scared to ask for help. We're going to visit with Andy Lopata, who is the author of the new book, Just Ask, Why Seeking Support is Your Greatest Strength, available on Amazon and published through Panoma Press. Andy is a specialist in professional relationships and networking for over 20 years, also called one of Europe's leading business networking strategists by the Financial Times. Andy, thank you for calling from overseas. Welcome in. How are you this evening?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me on the show, Casey.
I appreciate it. The book is a great read, and let me give you some props because I was just looking on Amazon, a whole bunch of 5-star reviews on your latest work here. Tell me a little bit about kind of what got you individually inspired, because obviously you know people, you work around a lot of people, and you interviewed a whole lot of people to get this together. But what kind of personally motivated you to help us ask for a little bit of help?
Yeah, thank you, Casey. Well, I mean, for me, it was probably about 5-6 years ago, and my business was really not doing that well. And I was going to a whole bunch of meetings of my professional association, an association I've been a member of since 2003. I've been on the board twice, and I call it my tribe. They're close friends. And yet when I was going to these meetings and my business was struggling and people were saying to me, how's business? I was saying, it's fine, it's great. And I suddenly realized that I was lying to everyone, I was lying to myself, and I consider myself to be fairly open. So if I couldn't open up to that group of people who I trusted, who would I open up to? And if I wasn't opening up, what about everyone else? And so that started me on the track of looking just at how we treat vulnerability, admitting we don't know things, and being comfortable asking for help.
It's interesting, and I think it's great that, this experience is worldwide. I mean, you're over there in the UK, but I think a lot of working Americans can relate to this. I think that we get kind of wrapped up in our own minds and our own lives, and that word, I'm fine, it drives me crazy. I actually kind of get upset with my mother when I talk to her on the phone and she says I'm fine, because it typically is hiding something. Is that just part of the human condition in 2021? Obviously, it's something that's been around for a while, but what do you make of kind of our, I guess, I don't know if the word is scared, but our inability to really reach out and ask for some help?
I think it's been around for a very long time, and it's something that globally, and you talk about it being a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, I purposely interviewed people from all over the world, all different cultures, because I wanted to know, is this a British thing? Is it an American thing? Or is it general? And there are differences, but underlying, we all have an element of this invulnerability, this facade, this mask that we wear. And I think personally, I'm no psychiatrist, but I think it comes from how we're brought up. Kids, as someone said in one of the interviews, actually, a 3-year-old doesn't have any reticence about asking for help. They'll go straight in. So at some point between that stage and when we grow up and we'll become teenagers, suddenly it becomes more important to show that you have the answers, that you are strong, that you've got this. And I think it comes from taunts from classmates and being told off by your teachers and told off by your parents, whatever it might be. There's cultural issues there as well. There's gender issues, but it's all there in what we're taught as we grow up, and that's common around the world.
We're talking with author Andy Lopata. The book is called Just Ask, Why Seeking Support is Your Greatest Strength, available on Amazon.com. And just read the reviews. A lot of different people there. Some brand name business people as well with some very kind words about it. Now, Andy, you spoke with a bunch of different people, over 30 business people, psychologists, coaches, and inspiring individuals. And what I like about the book is you kind of go sequentially, if you will. We're talking right now a little bit about people's reluctance to open up. But once you get there, you got to continue to kind of progress forward. So, I mean, we can't talk about every person you interviewed, but was there any kind of overlying theme, if you will, when talking with these people, some commonality between people and their inability, I suppose, to open up and how to get about opening up?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of underlying themes throughout the book. I think one of the main things is and this has struck me for quite a while, actually, even the people that you think have got it together have got something going on beneath the surface.
Yes.
And, among the people that I interviewed, you've got very powerful motivational speakers, a couple of American motivational speakers who are pretty well known, who have had, really troublesome backgrounds and difficult upbringings, and there's suicide attempts there and so on. And you don't see that. You meet the power. You see the facade, and you don't see what goes on behind the surface. I interviewed Hattie Webb, who, with her sister Charlie, was backing singer for both Leonard Cohen and Tom Petty. Leonard Cohen for 8 years and Tom Petty on his final tour. And she told me stories about both of them, about, where Leonard Cohen's hand was trembling before going on stage as he poured a coffee, really rock and roll. And Tom Petty in Vancouver talking about not feeling able to go on stage and do this. And, I was in the audience for Tom Petty's last London gig at Hyde Park, and you wouldn't know. You wouldn't have a clue he feels that. And I think, for me, that's a big theme, that when we know we're not alone with this feeling, when we know that it doesn't make us weak because everyone struggles, it makes it easy to cope with and easy to open up. And when you know that the people that you look at and put on a pedestal and really admire struggle with stuff behind the scenes, that makes it easier. And I don't think it's any coincidence you're seeing so many more people open up about vulnerability now, more than ever. And, certainly in the UK, that's been led by Prince William and Prince Harry. And when you've got role models like that talking about their vulnerability, it makes it easier for everyone else to open up.
Well, that's well said. And man, I miss Tom Petty too. I've seen him in concert here in the States, and he was quite a performer. And you wouldn't, again, never think that a guy like that had any, vulnerability or lack of confidence, but it shows that we are all kind of just people here. Now, you talk about different areas. I mean, there's professional help available. There's help at home. I think sometimes we're most scared, Andy, to open up to the people that are closest to us about what's actually going on. As I mentioned, when I talk with my mom and she says, I'm fine, it kind of, makes me think I better dig a little deeper, because fine's just a buzzword for maybe I'm not okay. But talk to me a little bit about, what the listeners can do as far as starting a conversation at home with family and friends who probably have your best interests in mind.
I think you have to decide who you're comfortable sharing with. I wouldn't do a catch-all, you should talk to family and friends. When I'm running sessions on this and I ask who do you share with at the moment, I would say that 80 to 90% of the responses is family and friends. And when I wrote the book, one of the things I was keen to explore was, would people be more comfortable opening up to a stranger? And there were very few people that said they would be. So family and friends does tend to be the go-to, but I recognise there might be someone listening who has, concerns there. And I just want to say that's okay. Find someone else. It might be a therapist. Sometimes talking to someone who can be objective can make a big difference. But otherwise, I would say don't just dump everything on someone at once.
Right.
Find out where they are and lead them into the conversation. And this goes both ways. If your mum's saying fine and you think she's not, don't force her down, force everything at once, but just ease things out of her. And it works both ways. So when people say, how are you? And you don't have to say, oh, I'm so glad you asked. Have you got 3 hours? Let me sit down and unburden
Right.
myself. But you say, well, actually, it's been a difficult week. Now, I always say there's two people that ask you the question, how are you? There's two types of people, those who care and those who don't care.
Sure.
Those who don't care will say, I'm sorry to hear that. Anyway, did you see the game last night?
Yep.
And that's a clear signal they're uncomfortable with the conversation. Those that care will say, I'm sorry you've had a bad week. What's happened? So that's a signal that you can just share a little bit more, another sentence. And each time, just let them open the gate to further conversation. So let them direct how far they're happy to go, how comfortable they are. And then it can evolve more naturally. And I think that's the key. I think people are frightened about, people suddenly dumping everything on them or doing that to other people. And it doesn't have to be the case.
We're talking with author Andy Lopata. The book is Just Ask, Why Seeking Support is Your Greatest Strength. Obviously, mental health is at a crisis level here in the United States, and I know you're dealing with the pandemic over there, as is the rest of planet Earth. Do you think that when we get through this, or as we're getting through it, people are being a little more open and honest? Are they kind of hiding inside themselves even more because we've all been trapped at home for so long? What role does the pandemic play as far as being willing to open up conversations about how we're actually feeling?
I think we're making progress, but it's accelerated this year because it's been happening. Brené Brown's TED Talk, I'm not sure the exact year, but Brené Brown's TED Talk's probably coming up to 10 years old now. And that was, for me, the starting point of this conversation, taking it to a new stage. The pandemic's accelerated it. I mean, I've been listening to the show since 4 o'clock, and I know you've got a mental health minute. I don't think, I might be wrong, but I don't think you'd have had that 10 years ago.
True.
So I think the world is changing. But there's still this major issue. A lot of people are speaking up about this, but in the UK, we've had one footballer, or soccer player, as you would call him, but one footballer has sadly taken his own life in the last 2 weeks, captain of a professional club. Another footballer who plays for my club is talking about not enjoying the game, thinking of quitting it, and all of the pressures on him. And because I talk about this and I write about this, I felt there was something wrong, but everyone else just said, just criticised him constantly, and on Twitter. So I think that we've still got a long way to go. And the point you made about people going into their shells, the one thing the pandemic has meant is that we don't have a lot of the water cooler conversations, which could give people a connection to the real world, if you like. Zoom isn't the real world.
No, it's not.
Skype isn't the real world. And it's those casual conversations as you pass people at work or you bump into a friend on the street or whatever that we're lacking when someone you bump into by accident says, "How are things?" And sometimes that triggers something, and that's gone out of our lives. So, yeah, there is a danger there, and we do need that real connection.
Can you talk a little about, the book is kind of, again, folks, the book is called Just Ask, Why Seeking Support is Your Greatest Strength, and it's broken into different sections. So we're talking a little bit about, finding the courage is section 1 to address the problem, setting up a strategy, and we've talked about some different things you can do there. But taking action is the hardest thing, Andy, whether it's, quitting drinking alcohol or trying to lose a few pounds or telling somebody, look, I am not emotionally okay, and I've got to actually get out there and basically kind of, be responsible for our own lives a little bit.
That's right, and you'll note that the first part of taking action I talk about is taking responsibility, because ultimately it's important to let others help you, but it's your life and it's your direction. So you've got to take responsibility. I interviewed a former world champion boxer, Billy Schwer, and I was intrigued to know about the role of the corner team. Because I see, boxing is seen as an individual sport, but of course you have a team behind you that get you there. But he said, they'll get you there. They'll coach you, they'll analyse the opposition, they'll work on your game plan. In between rounds, they'll be analysing the fight and correcting you. But when the bell goes, it's just you against someone who's trying to kill you, and it's all down to you. So that provided the perfect metaphor for all the advice you get. Ultimately, people can support you, they can advise you, they can validate what you're thinking, and all of those things. But you've got to take the action, and you've got to take responsibility for what steps you take. So it's not just the unburdening of sharing. It's not just the asking for help, but it's what you do with it that makes a big difference as well.
Got a couple minutes left here, Andy. Another part in the book, you talk about, it's section 5, actually. It's called How Do We Differ? And you have a chapter there about the difference between women and men and how we differ in our willingness to seek help. Just kind of, I don't know, sum that up for me in what you're talking about there as far as gender differences and the willingness to reach out.
Yeah, I had a premise going into writing the book. I felt that women would be more open, more willing to be vulnerable. I felt that men and women would both be more comfortable sharing with women rather than men. And you can call it masculine and feminine traits, if you like, as well. And I do interview someone who's transgender as well, which is quite interesting because they transitioned from a man to a woman. From a woman to a man, and didn't feel that alpha male need because they didn't come from that background. But actually, my premise wasn't proven. I wouldn't say it was wrong, but it wasn't proven. I think it's not as binary as, women are better than men. It's down to environment. So if you're a woman working in a male-dominated profession or industry, you're not going to find it to be easy to be vulnerable at all. And I've got a female friend who really struggles in terms of opening up to people in her profession because she's been stung so many times by people using that against her. So there's that type of environmental challenge. There's the cultural challenge. If you're in a patriarchy, so I interviewed people in India and in Russia, two very patriarchal societies where it's very hard for a man to be vulnerable. And if it is going to happen, it's going to be with other men. So it was much more nuanced than I expected. And I think that we can try and understand the role of gender. But ultimately, what I think the last 2 or 3 years have proven, as well as my research for the book, is that everyone's struggling. And one of the biggest things, and certainly in the UK at the moment, is the amount of focus on young men struggling with depression, with suicidal thoughts and so forth. That's where the problem is. And we've got charities set up and volunteer groups to support young men in that position, which people are responding to. So I think gender plays less of a role than I perhaps expected when I set out on the project.
Well, the book it's a fine read, folks, and I recommend you check it out. You can go over to Amazon and just read the reviews. It's called Just Ask by author Andy Lopata, Why Seeking Support is Your Greatest Strength. And a percentage of the royalties from each sale are being donated to a group called My Black Dog, a peer-to-peer online support service for people that are struggling a little bit with their mental health in England and Wales. And you can also check out Andy's podcast, Connected Leadership. He's also got 5 total books, so a wealth of knowledge here. And again, he talked with over 30 people from all kinds of backgrounds. You might be surprised as far as some of the insight that you get from people that you would perceive, as confident and not being vulnerable, how we're, basically all kind of the same underneath our skin. Andy, great work. Great to speak with you. Thanks for spending some time with us, and have a great rest of your night.
My pleasure. Thank you, Casey.
We'll take a quick break and be right back here on KAHI.